G'day, Stu here from UAV Futures, and today we're going to be checking out this little bad boy. This is the Vortex Mini, the Vortex 150, or some people call it the Baby Vortex. And a bit of a strange story actually when it comes to the Vortexes. They were one of the first quads that I ever saw that was really nice to fly out of the box. These people, Immersion RC sort of came out way back when I started, before I was even doing the channel or anything like that. I remember I used to fly around with a guy called Nick. So shout out to Nick if he's still into FPV or ever still watches these videos. But he actually had a Vortex, and I was flying around my 150, not my 150, I was flying around my Nighthawk there. And then I saw him fly his Vortex, and I was so jealous. And I was like, yes, I want one of those. They looked like they had so many cool features. So finally, now here we are, I guess, almost like 3 years later. We've got the Vortex 150. What we're going to be doing in this video, we'll be sticking it on the bench, breaking it down, having a look at its components, how it goes together, and then most importantly, we'll take it out to the field, fly it around, and we'll also get Grumpy Trev to have a bit of a look at it as well, because big shout out to Trev, because he actually helped me set up this drone, because it's a little bit different to how we set up most of them. Anyway, enough rambling from me. Let's stick it on the bench and get started. Alrighty, so here they are on the bench, and the first thing you're going to notice is just how big this thing looks for a 3-inch. Like, it's actually very long, and especially compared to something like a Atom V2 or so far, which is also a 3-inch with some of the same size motors. This thing is considerably bigger, and that makes me really wonder, how is that going to perform when it's flying around in the air? Is that sort of extra weight going to affect its flight characteristics? Now, I do wish I could weigh it. I think online it says it's like 196 grams, but for some reason my scales seem to be going all over the place, so I'm not trusting them at the moment, and I don't want to make a call on that, but overall, it does feel a little bit heavy for a 3-inch. But I digress. Let's move on and have a look at the actual components. So you've got some little HQ tri-blade props on the outside, and I think they're 30-30s, which is pretty cool. And you're going to need those sort of tri-blades. They're not the bull nose on here, so it should have I'm predicting a pretty smooth flight experience when we're flying around. And underneath there, we've got some pretty cool little, some of the Vortex motors, and they are 1306. I think they're 3300, 3200 kV. So that should result in some good lift. I would probably like to see a little bit higher kV just to get a bit more thrust out of here. But this thing should be fine if you're going to rock something like a high voltage 4S battery. And I should also say, you can rock either this thing is made for either a 3S or a 4S. Now those motors, they're connected up to some 16 amp ESCs in here, and they can handle a 20 amp burst, which is great. So it means you shouldn't be blowing those up anytime soon. And then with those out of the way, we start to get into the good stuff. So it's a pretty cool little design, but it does look a bit heavy. The whole frame sort of is pretty snug and does look pretty robust. But the good stuff is in the FPV and the flight controller sort of stuff. So, you know, we've got our FPV camera up the front and our little Spironet antenna out the back. I'm not a big fan of this one. I like these antennas, but I don't think they're good on such a tiny quad when every single gram grams start to count more and more. But the good stuff in here, we've got our F3 flight controller, which is integrated with our OSD. And I've got to say, the Vortexes have some of the best OSDs you have ever seen. Right from the get-go, back when I first saw a Vortex, and they haven't changed too much, they're pretty advanced back then, but they have some really cool stuff with their OSDs, which is great. But I don't know if you need all those features, really. I just need like timer and voltage and those sorts of things, but it's great. The OSDs that they've got in these things are top-notch. Really like the OSDs that you're doing right there. Well done, Immersion RC. Now, right here you can see you've got your little battery lead that comes out the top, and this was a little bit disappointing for me. You can see I've in the sort of test flight flying this thing around. I've cut mine right here, and that's because it's fallen into the props. So I found actually mounting a battery on here a little bit difficult. What I actually had to do was mount it underneath and sort of run this thing down the side, because I found every time I was flying it around, I was cutting up batteries, and we'll talk about that when we're out in the field. I'll show you guys some footage of it flying around, but that part's a little bit disappointing. I would prefer that they had just some, maybe if it came out the side right here or out this side, where, look, if you wanted it up, you could have it on the top, and if you wanted to have your battery mounted underneath, I think that's a much more viable option. It's going to save people cutting their leads and all that sort of stuff. Now, to make this thing easy to bind up, it does come with a little bind plug that comes out of here. But what I've done, well, what I actually should say, what I got Trevor to do for me, I asked Trevor to bind this one up for me, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So he put in a little FlySky receiver, not FlySky, he put in a little FreeSky receiver and bound it up to a Taranis to fly around with, because I actually fly with my Turnigy Evolution, and this thing, which is a big shame, which is something I really sort of found unfortunate, this thing doesn't do iBus, which was a little bit disappointing, because I love that on my Turnigy Evolution. That's my radio of choice. And I know Trevor's sort of jumps between the Evolution and also the Taranis, so we bound this up to a Taranis. But it was a bit of a shame that I had to sort of put it on a Taranis rather than just use my native radio. Look, I could still use S-Bus with it, but it just wouldn't be the same. I wanted to use iBus, so that seems like that's a bit of a letdown. I don't know why they couldn't get that working. But if you are using something that does use S-Bus, it was really, really easy. It would simply plug and play. If you want to have it on the top, you could simply connect your receiver on the top or on the back just here, or you can take it all apart and sort of put it inside. So big shout out to Trev for setting that up and putting in this receiver for me. So yeah, very, very grateful for that. But having said that, this quad is unlike any other quad that you have to set up. It is totally different, and honestly it had Trev scratching his head for quite a while and letting off a few curse words. So what you actually have to do is very different to most quads out there. So most quads, you build them, you put it into Betaflight, bind it up, you're ready to rock and roll. This quad, or the Vortexes, you actually need to do some stuff with the OSD and the radio first before you can even really get into it is rocking Betaflight, before it even gets into Betaflight and saves its settings and all that sort of jazz. So that part, that really had Trev scratching his head, because, you know, you think you know how things work, you think how simple they're going to be, you hook it all up, and what happens? It won't save any of the settings. So be warned, if you are going to buy one of these, please do read the manual. Usually, you know, you do learn something every single day, but you definitely do need to be plugging this thing in, going through its calibration first, before you can even get into Betaflight. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Look, that might be Immersion RC's way of doing stuff, but I prefer it if it all sort of sticks the same and all the quads have the same sort of startup procedure. But that's just me. And once it only took a few minutes to sort of rectify, but once that was done, it was a lot easier to get on, get set, and get flying. Look, it's got some really cool features in here. It does feel like it's a little bit heavy, so we'll have to see in its flight performance. I love the OSD, and look, I do like the little compact sort of settings that they've got going on here, but is it going to be enough? You know, are those features going to be enough to outweigh sort of maybe how heavy this thing is going to be? Anyway, what we should do, let's cut down to the field. I'm going to fly it around, and we'll also get Grumpy Trev to share his thoughts on it as well. Anyway, let's cut down to the field in 3, 2, 1, boop! Alrighty, down here in the field, just put a little pack on the baby Vortex or the Vortex Mini, and let's rip it around. There won't be any HD footage because obviously this thing's too small to carry it. So we'll get some FPV footage, and then we'll also give it over to Grumpy Trev and see what he thinks. Alright, let's do it. Alrighty, so here we are on board with the OSD, and I'm just going to put a freeze frame up a little bit so we can talk about it. So you can see this has got some of the best, I guess, graphics you're going to find in an OSD. We've got our battery voltage, so it can handle a 3 or 4S battery. It tells you how big your battery is, and then you can also set up your VTX bands and your frequencies and all that sort of stuff, and it also tells you what sort of version you're on. So very, very cool stuff. There's me actually, I'm just checking that it's the Immersion RC box, and we should be ready to rock and roll and have a bit of a flight. So overall, the OSD in these things is very, very fun. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy them. They're nice and they're big and they're clear. They show you everything that you need. It shows you your channel, your milliwatts, everything you sort of need when you're flying around and your modes. So yeah, overall, a very, very cool OSD. I know I've said it before, but I think that's what this thing's strongest features are. So here we're just flying around in the bush, and look, it is only a 3S pack, so it probably does have a little bit more punch, I guess, especially if you want to put a 4-inch on there. I found it relative, I guess, medium sort of quick. You definitely could feel the weight, but one thing that was notable, it was a very, very smooth flying experience. And that's because, you know, they've obviously spent a lot of time doing the tune. Oh, there we go, a little bounce off the ground into the trees. I think I did hit a few things running around with this, and it also did feel a little bit strange jumping over and flying with a Taranis radio versus flying around normally with my Evolution radio. So yeah, so it took a little bit to get used to, but flying around, look, it felt like it was quite zippy for such a little quad. And I think if you wanted, I wouldn't take this for some serious races or anything like that, but if you're after something that was really easy to use and you could just take out maybe to some car parks or somewhere where there wasn't too much space, or you're flying around some little abandoned buildings, or maybe you've got a bit of a larger backyard, something like this would be totally awesome, because I think Trevor had a lot of fun with it as well, and we'll check out what he thinks. But overall, it was very much what I expected from Immersion RC. There's another crash. Kept getting lucky. It was pretty resilient actually in how many times it bounced off the ground. But yeah, overall, awesome OSD, super smooth flight experience, but the performance probably wasn't top-notch. There's a little battery warning coming on the screen as well. So yeah, the performance wasn't amazing, and that's probably due to the weight and also rocking a 3S battery. Alright, so I've flown it around. I really liked it actually, super smooth out of the box, and I also loved the OSD. That's probably one of the best OSDs that I've used. So we've given it to Grumpy Trev, so let's see what he thinks. Radio Trev.
Oh, yeah, I love the OSD already. I really like the display. You've got milliamps, you've got current. See how it flies. Try not to get this one in a tree. Oh, it's nice and smooth. Fast. I can't believe how good this flies. Whoops. Tree, another tree. Up, up. And it bounces. It's not a bad little quad actually. Yeah, look, it's pretty quick for a little quad. I like it smooth, which it should be now. I think it's a bit expensive for what it is. I think it was $300 or something like that. Yeah, well, look, it's good. It's responsive. Probably not as quick as another little 4-inch we were playing with before. Look, it doesn't excite me. The OSD is really nice. It's fast. Look, if you don't want to build a quad, this is probably the ideal one for you to get.
Who would you recommend this to?
Beginners. I think advanced guys that probably want something a bit faster than this. Pretty good for a beginner. Look, it's alright, but it doesn't excite me.
What would you give it for a Grumpy Trev rating out of 10?
Oh, well, I'll probably give it a rating out of 10. Oh, look, it's not crap, so I'd give it a 5, I think. I land upside down? Yep.
Alright, so we heard Trev's talking about the flight experience, but he wanted to share some other stuff about it as well.
I had the opportunity to set this thing up, and I thought it was literally a pain in the ass. If you don't like reading instructions, don't buy one of these. If you like reading instructions, you've got to fart ass around with loading their software on it first before anything will save. I just grabbed this thing, plugged in a Betaflight, saved everything. Well, I thought I saved it. Then it wouldn't arm. Go back into it, nothing had saved. Then I delved into it a bit further, and apparently you load their proprietary software, flash it, save your settings, and then it'll save. I just thought that was a pain in the ass and a bit over the top. This you don't need. So the guys I know want to get a quad, plug it in a Betaflight, go click, 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 bang, you're up and running. And this you just had to fart around with. Yeah, look, it flew okay for a beginner. You're not going to worry about the setting up because you're not like anyone else that's set up quads before. Yeah. For a beginner, it'd be a great little quad.
But what about the setup? What would you give me 2 words to explain that setup process?
Pretty
okay.
Alrighty, so there it is. There's my review of the Vortex 150 or the Mini Vortex, whatever it is. I'll leave a link down below in the description anyway. But yeah, for me, this one's like a bit of nostalgia, which is probably why I probably like it and have a bit of a soft spot for it. But on the other hand, is it the best performing 3-inch that I've seen? No, not really. It's a little bit pricey, and when it comes to it, I think it might be a little bit big or a little bit heavy when it comes to flying around a 3-inch. Look, it is a ton of fun, but I do think there's some other options out there now. These used to be the king of ready-to-flies, but now there's so many more players in the market, I definitely pays to have a bit of a shop around and find one that's right for you. One thing I really do like, I really do think that these have the best OSDs out of any of the quads I've ever seen. So that's one of the most amazing features, but other than that, yeah, just like a bit of an average, not too exciting quad. Anyway, hope that you guys like that, and hope you like Grumpy Trev giving a bit of a rumble and a bit of a grumble about, you know, some pros and cons of this bad boy. But subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAV Futures family, there's things like bonus Velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.